The Art Workers Coalitions went into the museum and they held up this poster which they had produced in front of Picasso's Guernica. So one civilian atrocity, military atrocity against civilians, is put in front of another record of a famous military atrocity against civilians to make this connection. So one of the outcomes of all of this organizing, the Art Workers Coalition didn't last long. Only almost 2 years, maybe, 1.5 years, was a continued impulse towards organizing within the staff of the Museum of Modern Art itself. Demonstrations against the museum began earlier than the Art Workers Coalition. There was actually a whole series of demonstrations. One of the ones that really caught my attention was the demonstration by the Surrealists against the Dada and Surrealism show in 1968. And here they are in costume, in a photograph by Peter Moore. And they marched outside, and the reason was that William Rubin, the curator, had sort of leached all the political content out of Surrealism and Dada and presented it as a continuation of modernist formalism, the development of modern art. Okay, it's a lineal stream with Mondrian and Hugo Ball. You notice how abstract that costume is? Yeah, okay, so these guys didn't like that, so they marched. But the show traveled. The show traveled to Chicago. And there, the Surrealists, and this time, really official Surrealists who had met Andre Breton and been blessed, as Surrealists, Penelope and Franklin Rosemont, also demonstrated against the Dada and Surrealism show. These guys, the Rosemonts, had started a gallery called the Bugs Bunny Gallery. My Bugs is here. And they had also affiliated with the IWW. In New York, artists worked undercover, as it were, to produce graphics for the Art Workers Coalition. On the right is the One Blood Dollar with Nelson Rockefeller, who was involved, one of the founding members of the Museum of Modern Art. No, not founding, but his family basically held up the museum, and I think to this day it was extremely important. And Nelson, of course, was vice president, and down with the war. So he was a target, and all of the people on the trustees who were involved in war industries were a target. And on the other side is the cover of the open hearing, which the Art Workers Coalition held, and many artists expressed their grievances, and their transcripts were published in a book. And on the cover is a membership card for the Museum of Modern Art, stamped AWC, Art Workers Coalition. Because I'm an art worker, I should get into this museum for free. So, and this, the forgery was a forgery, but a blatant one, was done by Joseph Cassuth. But I think to this day nobody knows who designed the blood dollar. Another outcome of the Art Workers Coalition meetings, they had many different committees. There's no archive of the Art Workers Coalition, so it's difficult to know exactly how the committee formation happened. This question, the Artist Reserve Rights Transfer and Sales Agreement. This is comes out of the problem that became front page news when Robert Rauschenberg started yelling at Robert Scull during an auction. You bought my piece of art for $200 and you just sold it for 50 grand! Where's my cut? Well, you don't get one, sorry. So this was to address that. This was formulated by a lawyer, Robert Prashansky, and Seth Siegelau, who was an entrepreneur of conceptual art and a committed Marxist politico. Liza Bear also worked on this. And it's the Artist's Reserved Rights Transfer and Sales Agreement. Now today, this superbly crafted legal document is used by absolutely nobody except Hans Hake, who was an original member of the Art Workers Coalition. Okay, I'm not going to take time because this will be a mess, but there's a good website about the AWC on leftmatrix.com, which is a nice site. And you can download the open hearing transcripts and the documents transcripts. Will give you more than you ever wanted to know about the Art Workers Coalition, Soho. And here's where the book kind of wanders, because Soho doesn't really have these kind of specifically, closely, politically defined artist groups. But what it has is a very persistent form of collective organization. And here I show you the artists associated with, like, the Tanager Gallery. I don't have the caption. It's hard to put them in an open office impress. But this is like a 1950s co-op gallery on 10th Street. The co-op galleries were organized by the artists themselves. They all pitched in, they paid the rent, and they showed their stuff. And some of the most important galleries during the abstract expressionist period were co-ops. And this persisted into the 60s in the Green Gallery, which was also a co-op and one of the primary galleries for the minimal art movement. But these galleries sort of have been wiped away from the face of history. And I discovered there was a woman, Joellen Bard, who was very persistent in trying to organize an exhibition about the co-op gallery movement, and she never could sell it. She just couldn't sell it. So, to any museum, or no one would do it. So all of her plans are sitting in a file in the Archives of American Art. So what happens is that there comes about this alternative space movement, which in a sense jumps the notion of the cooperative, which is by now, by the 70s, late 60s, early 70s, is really tired, you know. Man, these guys, you know. So what happens in Soho with all the empty industrial space that was awaiting urban renewal is that artists are able to snatch it up cheaply and open their own spaces. And I'm showing you here a number of images. This one is the group from Heresies, the Feminist gallery, which was a straight-up cooperative, but functioning with the wind of the feminist movement behind them. Artist Space, which is not an alternative space. It was founded by the New York State Council on the Arts. It's a direct government-supported project. They had an innovative way of organizing the shows. They asked established artists to pick young artists that they liked, and those would be the people who would get the show. Irving Sandler, a leading art critic from the abstract expressionist days, was the kind of de facto organizer of artist space. And the guy up there on the left, Brian O'Doherty, in his several guises, as on the left a regular Joe, an effete art critic, a mystery man, Toulouse-Lautrec-like artist, and a cross-dresser. Like to show, oh, this is Holly Solomon's space. This is another of these quote-unquote alternative spaces. Well, Brian liked to show at 112 Green Street under the name of Patrick Ireland. That was his artist persona. But his art bureaucrat persona was as the visual arts director for the National Endowment for the Arts. And he organized a grant program called Artist Workshop. It was based on 112 Green Street, and he offered the funds to artists across the country. So suddenly the model of 112 Green Street was replicated all over the USA. And 112, of course, was inhabited by the demon spirit of Gordon Matta-Clark, who was an amazingly prolific, extremely well-connected artist, the son of Roberta Matta, With his partner Carolyn Gooden, Gordon opened a restaurant called Food. And here is the image that appeared as an advertisement in Avalanche magazine. Early 70s, it opens Food, and it was described as the canteen for the artist community. Gordon also organized exhibitions. One of the most kind of paradigmatic of the collective nature of the Soho community was the open house dumpster, which has been replicated, Jerry Hovigamian thinks 5 times in its subsequent years and subsequent exhibitions. It essentially was a dumpster kind of constructed as like a house or a building or a corridor where you would walk in and there'd be like little spaces. Actually, now that I'm looking at it, reminds me of Alan Capro's setup for Happening in 6 Parts. But yeah, so you walk along and somebody would come popping out and you bump into people literally inside this dumpster. Okay, and one of the more recent recreations of open house dumpster was by Rirpreet Taravanija, who was, when he was younger, an aficionado of the Fluxus movement. And Rirpreet stuck a recreation of Gordon Matta-Clark's open house dumpster next to a recreation of his untitled food piece at the Daniel Zwirner Gallery when Gordon Matta-Clark's retrospective was up at the Whitney. So he kind of pinned himself to the reputation of this earlier artist. Gordon actually, I think, picked up the whole food gig from this guy, Daniel Sperry, who is a Swiss artist who basically, maybe you've seen him, he's a nouveau realist, a new realist, makes these kind of food assemblages, and it's the record of, your greatest meal. Gordon Matta-Clark is most famous, of course, for his cuts into buildings, through buildings. One of his engagements, which I discussed, was with the graffiti artists who were coming up in the early 70s in New York. This is an article by Richard Goldstein, who later worked for the Village Voice and covered the Times Square show, actually, discussing the handwriting on the walls. This is the early 70s. Should we love it and leave it? Yeah, okay. Twyla Tharp used these early graffiti artists in New York to do decor for her dance performances, so they're kind of becoming a thing. And today they're a big thing.